Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Miss Jennifer Blank, and I'm here to share with you Part 4, Political Parties, in Unit 8, the build-up to the Civil War. Now, a note to my students, do not feel like you have to take notes on everything that's in here. This PowerPoint is more about telling you the story so that you have some context of how the party divisions contributed to the Civil War, to the outbreak of the Civil War. So you don't need to make a note of every single name and every single date, but you should have a sense of the key political parties, a basic idea of what each party stood for, and you should understand conceptually that this splintering of parties really led to the outbreak of the Civil War. So in Part 1, which was not a video lesson, it's just a regular PowerPoint, that was for data analysis. Part 2, we reviewed relevant content, talked about sectionalism, slavery, and abolitionism. In Part 3, we went into some detail about the key causes of the Civil War. And in Part 4, where we are right now, we're going to talk about the massive changes that happened in political parties during this era. So, some important things to keep in mind. During this period, the party structure of the U.S. experienced massive changes. These changes reflect the intensifying sectional divides that started during our founding, and they persisted throughout our history. So these tensions, these debates, these fights started during our founding period, and they calmed down a little bit, but they weren't resolved. The Civil War is going to resolve a lot of these issues, but we are still facing some of those issues today. So it's very important that we understand this. No matter how bad you may think our political parties are now, our party problems are absolutely nothing compared to how bad they were right before the Civil War. So this should give you some perspective of how bad things can get. So this is a graph breakdown of the shift in some party power. All right, so you see from 1852 to 53, Democrats are really massively in control. You have some Whigs and some other random parties, but ooh, 1854 to 55, just a couple of short years later, look at these differences. Now all of a sudden you've got 62 people from the Know-Nothing Party, you know, where'd they come from? You've got some Republicans, which didn't exist before, and we've got Whigs and Democrats. So you see how the splintering is occurring. This is making it very difficult for compromise. So, new issues and candidates for the election of 1852. The Whigs and the Democrats are still the two key parties at this point for presidential elections, but you have this splintering that has occurred in the Congress. So the Whigs nominated Winfield Scott, and the Whigs had difficulty defining an issue. The Democrats nominated Franklin Pierce. He claimed credit for, the Democrats did, for national prosperity, and he promised to defend the Compromise of 1850. So, we have the collapse of the Whigs moving past this election, the election of 1852, and we have the rise of this party called the Know-Nothings, also known as the American Party. They were fueled by nativism, this anti-immigrant sentiment, this anti-immigrant feeling, and the desire to decrease immigrant power. They also hope to strengthen the naturalization process in order to decrease immigrant voting. And we still face this today. There are a lot of people who are against immigration. And these ideas appealed to ex-Democrats, ex-Whigs, and industrial workers, because a lot of the industrial workers were competing with jobs with these new immigrants. So the Know-Nothing Party in 1854, they took control of the state legislatures in those states, and they seemed on the verge of challenging the Democratic Party. It actually looked like they were going to mount a serious effort. But in 1856, they collapsed because there was nobody experienced to lead them, and they had absolutely zero response to slavery, which of course was a key issue of the day. Now, changes in the two-party system. Let's break this down. So at this point, at least starting out, we have the Democrats, the Whigs, and the Free Soilers. This is going to shift. So the Democrats were pro-slavery. They said it should be everywhere, like yesterday, all the time. They were predominantly, mostly a Southern party. The Whigs split both the North and the South. They could go either way depending on the region. And they were a waste of space in the election of 1860. They were like a non-event. The Free Soilers were a coalition of misfits, and they ended up being absorbed by other parties. They wanted to stop the spread of slavery and keep blacks out so whites could get all the land. So they were racist too. They were also a waste of space in the election of 1860, which brings us to the Republicans. They were like, slavery in the South is okay. Expansion of slavery, not so much. Kansas-Nebraska Act, yeah, that's got to go. Non-starter. They're not happy about that. And they were primarily a Northern party. So, now we see the development of the GOP, the grand old party. These are the Republicans. People in both major parties who opposed the Kansas-Nebraska bill, that's who developed the GOP. So you have some anti-Nebraska Democrats and some anti-Nebraska Whigs. So in 1854, they formed the Republican Party, and the Free Soilers joined them. So they opposed the expansion of slavery, and they advocated high tariffs, homesteads, and internal improvements. Welcome, hello, American system. So the GOP was purely a sectional party. They had no support in the South, like none, okay? Which is ironic considering how now the Republican Party seems to be the party of the South. So let's revisit the Kansas-Nebraska Act because it's very important in the context of politics. So it changed American politics and increased sectionalism, all right? You have a coalition of Whigs, Northern Democrats, and Free Soilers, and it was mostly North. So this purple area is where is Northern dominated. That's the north side of the country, so that's where really the Republicans were, okay? Then you have the Southern Whigs, and they defected and became the Democratic Party, and that was completely a Southern party, okay? So that's very important to know. We have the rise of the Republicans. Let's talk about this a little bit more. It really appealed to Northerners for a number of reasons. They believed in free soil, and they fought against the idea of a slavery takeover, okay? They wanted to protect free white workers and boost the economy, and it was comprised of seasoned politicians. So they were able to really build up the party by 1856 because they were experienced and they could lead. So here, this interesting election. So I want you to kind of watch these graphs, and I can't take credit for these slides because I borrowed them from a colleague, but they are wonderful, so I thought I'd share them with you. So watch American party politics become sectional rather than national from 1848 to 1860. So I want you to look at this graph and see the blue versus the pink, okay, and then also the orange peachy color. All right, watch that. Ooh, both parties have national appeal, so they're all over the place now. So the Whigs are kind of dropping out, but we have some other interest in the other territories. So now we have some national appeal. And then, ooh, Republicans in the North, Democrats in the South. And then by the time we hit 1860, we are uniformly split. And the Republicans will elect Abraham Lincoln, and he doesn't even campaign in the South. He didn't carry a single Southern state. We're going to explore that a little bit later. So American politics experienced a significant change from 1800 to 1860. In the early 1800s, sectional rivalries were evident, but national parties kept them on the DL. They just kept them calmed down. But by the 1840s and 1850s, this westward expansion actually started intensifying sectional divisions, and the North was protecting their region, the South was protecting theirs. So now we have a fight, just to summarize where we are right now. All right. So, Lincoln-Douglas debates. Lincoln didn't just start out running for president. He actually originally ran against this guy, Stephen Douglas, in the Senate election of 1858, okay? They both debated throughout the state, and they focused on slavery and its expansion. Douglas had this idea called the Freeport Doctrine. He said people could keep slavery out by refusing to enact the black codes and other laws necessary for slavery's survival. Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln. And slavery should not be extended into the territories. He lost the election. Stephen Douglas would advance. But he did gain national prominence with his ideas. So that's very, very important. This is a very important election. My guys in class, we're going to read excerpts from this debate. So the Freeport Doctrine, 1858, Lincoln was asking the question, is there any lawful way in which the people of a territory could exclude slavery? Douglas said, well, unless you pass laws to protect it, it's not going to survive. So if a territorial legislature didn't enact any laws, then slavery wouldn't exist. Who cares about the Supreme Court? If there are no laws to enact it, it's not going to stay. So in the election of 1860, we have a mess. So let's start with the Democratic conventions, then we're going to move into the Republican. So Democratic convention was held at Charleston, South Carolina. Many Southern delegates actually walked out. They established their own convention with a complete pro-slavery platform, but they failed to agree on but because in this regular convention in Charleston, it failed to agree on a nominee, it adjourned. So then we have this Baltimore convention. Northerners and Southerners could not agree, and the party split into sectional halves. Northern Democrats wanted Stephen Douglas, but Southern Democrats walked out and established their own faction. There's that word again, the Constitutional Democrats. So they nominated this guy, Breckinridge, on a pro-slavery platform. So the Democrats are now split. They've nominated two different presidential candidates. This is an issue. It's going to make it easier for Lincoln to win. Now, in the Republican convention, some different things happened. It was held in Chicago, but only 5 of the 15 slave states are represented. Republicans nominated Lincoln on the third ballot, so the third vote to see who would be the nominee. And the GOP Platform was a political and economic program that was backed by the North. It was developed by the North, backed by the North. Upward revision of the tariff, so make it higher. Free farms in the West, that was the Homestead Act, give free land to the settlers who would go there. Railroad subsidies by the federal government to help private companies build railroads. You want to preserve the Union and don't extend slavery into the territories. So, in the election of 1860, this is what happened. You basically have two separate elections. Lincoln versus Douglas in the North, Breckinridge versus Bell in the South. All right, and what happens is GOP, well, the Republicans weren't even on the ticket in 10 southern states. And Lincoln ended up winning the election, like I said, due to the Democratic split. He only won about 40% of the popular vote, but he easily won the Electoral College because he swept the free states. Okay, Breckinridge won most of the South's popular vote and 10 of the 15 slave states, but it was not even close to being enough electoral votes. So Lincoln takes the election. So here's the breakdown of what it looks like, where the red is Republican, the green, that's Lincoln, the red, the green is Breckinridge, Southern Democrat, the orange is Bell, and the brown is Douglas. So you can see you've got like a little bit of brown right there and then a little bit of brown right there, and that's about the it. So Douglas really was a non-event. It's basically between Breckinridge and Lincoln Lincoln took way more electoral votes, so that's how he won. Here's another breakdown of the popular vote, just so you can get a sense. This is Stephen Douglas. This is Abraham Lincoln. This is John Bell. And then the green is Breckinridge. Okay, so you can get a sense of who took what. So Lincoln by far is the victor. Here's another version. Here's a graph. Blue is Douglas. Purple is Bell. Yellow is Breckinridge. And green is Lincoln. So you see the massive difference in electoral votes. So, essential issue. The United States versus the States United. The South said we're separate individual states. We came together to form the Union. Since we formed it, therefore we can opt out. The North said, the Union was created by the states. If the Union is dissolved, there is nothing. You guys signed on for the Constitution. You have to follow it. Lincoln was not an emancipator. He was not pro-equality. He was fighting to save the Union, not free the slaves. He was a Federalist and a Constitutionalist. He could care less about freeing the slaves. People call him the great emancipator. That could not be further from the truth. That is historically wrong. He was not in it for equality. He was in it to save the Union. So, the Deep South secedes. December 20th, 1860, South Carolina is the first state to say, peace out, Union. Then, in 1861, the Confederate States of America were formed with those states comprising it. All right? Here is a breakdown map of secession. So you have free territories right over here. You have slave states that stayed loyal to the Union. Those are known as the border states. You have the free states here, and then these are free territories. Okay? And the purple are free states. So there's the breakdown of secession. Here we have the Confederate States of America. All right? And these states, this peachy color, they'll secede after the first official battle of the Civil War, Fort Sumter. So, some things I want you to think about after this unit is over as we move forward into Unit 9 and actually talk about the Civil War itself. First of all, was this war fought because of slavery and slavery alone? Could the slavery question have been solved without the Civil War? Did compromise work? And is Congress better at compromise today? An interesting thing to think about as we go forward. So, some key ideas. This is a quote from Lincoln that I really found influential. And so I'm going to read this to you, and I want you kind of to think about it as we move forward and launch into the Civil War. It presents the question whether discontented individuals, too few in number to control the administration according to organic law in any case, can always, upon the pretenses made in this case, or on any other pretense, break up their government, and thus practically put an end to free government upon the earth. It forces us to ask, is there, in all republics, this inherent and fatal weakness? Must a government of necessity be too strong for the liberties of its own people, or too weak to maintain its own existence? So this was a central question that Lincoln explored. His goal was to preserve the Union, not to free the slaves, and we will explore this in greater detail as we move forward. I hope this lesson was useful for you, and I will see you next time.